Now to discuss the meeting between the two leaders is the University of Maryland of Michael Dingman Chair Anil Gupta. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you. I hear that you're in Bangkok and you're here to help us explain why this is such a big deal. So, who will benefit most from the $4 billion that the U.S. has pledged to India so far?
Good to see you, Phil. I think the $4 billion actually is, that's good because, and most of it will actually go towards financing exports of U.S. goods to India, in renewable energy and other made in U.S. goods. But I think in the overall scheme of things, the biggest outcome from Mr. Obama's visit to India really is the civil nuclear agreement. Because that was the beginning of a transformation in the India-U.S. relationship back in 2005. And then after that, nothing happened. And that's because India's laws regarding who bears the liability for any accidents essentially became completely unacceptable to the American companies. And that was a big, big roadblock. And I think the two leaders succeeded in essentially detonating that roadblock. So I think that is the single biggest outcome from this visit.
I mean, obviously, $4 billion is not a lot of money in the bigger picture of things when you think of the hundreds of billions of trade that a country normally does.
Exactly.
The private company, isn't that what we're aiming for? Aren't we looking for private investment into India, and I suppose vice versa as well? I mean, who is the target market here in terms of India looking at America?
Yeah, I think, in terms of exports from India to the U.S., it's really, right now, it's primarily services, IT services, and, but legal services, but various types of services. I think exports from U.S. to India, it's very heavily around defense, it's around electronics. Those are the two big. In terms of investment, obviously, investment from U.S. to India is much bigger than from India to the U.S. Of the total amount of FDI that India got in 2014, roughly in the $35–40 billion range, actually a good chunk of that came from the U.S. I would say, probably predominantly from the U.S., followed by Europe. The figures are not yet in. So if we look at that, once again, I mean, $4 billion is, if that's important, it helps. But I think its value is really much more symbolic than substantive. On the substantive side, I still, believe that the really big outcomes were in the area of civil nuclear energy. Also, in terms of, certainly India, as we know, India is the biggest buyer of arms around the world. And obviously, U.S. is the biggest exporter. But to go beyond that, as part of Mr. Modi's Make in India initiative, he wants to actually not just buy defense equipment from the U.S., but to co-develop and co-produce. And I think some agreements on that, both leaders said they have made progress. We don't know the concrete details yet, but those are the big ones.
Yeah. But now, look, okay, I mean, that sounds great, and we've talked about India buying new jets and new arms and weapons, and there's its neighbor Pakistan obviously watching this very closely as well, along with other neighbors. Their reaction to this is, are they going to welcome this sort of relationship between India and the U.S., especially when it comes to the military?
I think, the fact is that India, and not just currently, but for the last 10 years, has been one of the most aggressive builders of defense capability. So in that sense, what Mr. Obama's visit and the agreements, they are nothing new. I think the change is that instead of buying from the U.S. everything, or buying from Russia or other sources like Europe, is actually that to start also co-develop and co-produce within India. So that eventually India builds more of that defense capability from a production and R&D point of view internally, and begins to build an export capability. All of that will take time, but purely from a geopolitical point of view, the fact that India would start to co-develop and co-produce, I don't think changes very much, because it is just part and parcel of India building up its defense capabilities very aggressively, and that it's been doing for quite some time.
It has been quite a last couple of years for India in the headlines. Anil Gupta, thank you very much.